They surrounded her on the rooftop at dusk. 4 arrogant cadets, 1 quiet maintenance worker. They saw weakness, an easy target, someone who didn't belong. The chanting started low, then grew louder. Drop her, let her die. They shoved her toward the edge, laughing, certain she was helpless. But as her sleeve lifted during the struggle, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A tattoo. Not just any tattoo, one that told a story they were never supposed to hear. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about hidden strength and quiet respect, consider subscribing. What happened next would teach them the hardest lesson of their lives. The first light of dawn had not yet broken over Redstone Military Academy when Sloane Harriman pushed through the maintenance entrance at the north side of the complex. The heavy metal door groaned on its hinges, a sound she had grown accustomed to over the months she had worked here. Her boots made soft sounds against the polished concrete floor as she moved through the dimly lit corridors, a ring of keys jangling quietly at her hip. The academy was still asleep, or at least most of it was. Somewhere in the distance she could hear the faint echo of early morning drills beginning on the far training grounds. She did not pay them much attention. Sloane moved with a kind of practiced efficiency that came from routine. Her maintenance uniform was faded but clean, the fabric worn soft from repeated washing. Her hands bore the marks of her work, small scars and calluses that spoke of years spent fixing things that others broke or neglected. She kept her hair pulled back in a simple tie, nothing fancy, nothing that drew attention. Attention was the last thing she wanted. She made her way to the maintenance shed tucked behind the main administrative building. It was a small space, cluttered with tools and spare parts, but it was hers. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, flipping on the overhead light. The fluorescent bulb flickered twice before settling into a steady hum. She set her thermos on the workbench and began gathering the tools she would need for the day. A leaking faucet in the officers' mess hall, a faulty circuit breaker in Building 4, a stuck window in the library. Small tasks, simple tasks. The kind of work that kept her hands busy and her mind quiet. As she sorted through her tool bag, she paused for a moment, her eyes drifting to the locker in the corner. It was old and dented, the kind of locker you might find in any industrial building. Inside, her work clothes hung on hooks. A pair of spare boots sat at the bottom, and on the top shelf, pushed to the very back, was a locked metal case. She stared at it for a moment, then turned away. She did not open it. She never did. By the time the sun had fully risen, the academy was alive with activity. Cadets marched in formation across the parade grounds. Instructors barked orders from raised platforms. The air was filled with the sounds of discipline and ambition. Redstone was one of the most prestigious military academies in the country, a place where the children of senators and generals came to learn the art of leadership. It was a world of polished brass and crisp salutes, of legacy admissions and family connections. It was a world that did not notice people like Sloane Harriman. She spent the morning working her way through her task list. The faucet in the officers' mess hall had a worn washer that needed replacing. She knelt on the tile floor, her tool bag open beside her, and made the repair with steady hands. A few officers passed by, their voices carrying snippets of conversation about training schedules and upcoming inspections. None of them looked at her. She was part of the background, as invisible as the walls. After finishing the faucet, she moved on to Building 4. The circuit breaker was housed in a utility closet on the second floor. She climbed the stairs with her tool bag slung over her shoulder, her boots echoing in the stairwell. The hallway was empty when she reached the second floor, though she could hear voices coming from one of the classrooms. She found the utility closet and opened the panel. The breaker had tripped due to a power surge. She reset it, tested the circuits, and closed the panel. The entire process took less than 10 minutes. It was as she was leaving the building that she first encountered them. 4 cadets stood near the entrance, their uniforms immaculate, their postures confident. They were laughing about something, their voices carrying the easy arrogance of people who had never been told no. Sloane kept her head down and moved to walk past them. She had learned long ago that the best way to avoid trouble was to remain unnoticed. But one of them, a tall young man with sharp features and a smile that did not reach his eyes, stepped into her path. He looked at her with a kind of casual curiosity, the way someone might look at a stray dog. His name tag read Vale. "You work here," he said. It was not a question. Sloan nodded. Maintenance. He glanced at his friends, then back at her. Make sure you stay out of the way during training hours. We have inspections coming up. She nodded again and moved around him. The others laughed, a sound that followed her as she walked away. She did not look back. She did not react. She simply kept walking. The rest of the morning passed without incident. She fixed the stuck window in the library, replaced a burnt-out light fixture in the gymnasium, and cleared a clogged drain in one of the dormitory buildings. The work was repetitive, but she did not mind. Repetition was safe. Repetition did not require thought. By midday, she returned to the maintenance shed to eat lunch. She sat on the workbench, unwrapping a sandwich she had brought from home. The shed was quiet except for the hum of the overhead light. She ate slowly, her eyes drifting to the locker in the corner. The metal case inside seemed to call to her, a reminder of a life she had left behind. She looked away. The afternoon brought more tasks: a broken hinge on a classroom door, a malfunctioning thermostat in the administrative offices, a chipped tile in one of the bathrooms. She moved through the academy like a ghost, unseen and unheard. It was exactly how she wanted it. But as the day wore on, she began to notice something. The same 4 cadets from that morning seemed to be everywhere. She saw them in the hallway outside the gymnasium. She saw them near the library. She saw them again outside the dormitory building where she had been working. Each time, they looked at her with the same casual disdain. She did not know why they had taken an interest in her, but she could feel their eyes on her. It made the back of her neck prickle with unease. That evening, as the sun began to set, she received a call over her radio. The voice of the dispatcher crackled through the static. Harriman, we have a report of a jammed door on the rooftop access level, Building 7. Can you respond? Sloan pressed the button on her radio. Copy. Responding now. She gathered her tools and made her way to Building 7. The academy was quieter now, most of the cadets having finished their training for the day. The hallways were dimly lit, the golden light of the setting sun streaming through the windows. She climbed the stairs to the rooftop access level, her boots echoing in the stairwell. When she reached the top, she found the door that led to the rooftop. It was slightly ajar, the mechanism clearly jammed. She set down her tool bag and examined the lock. The latch had become misaligned, likely from repeated use. It would be a simple fix. She was reaching for her tools when she heard voices. They were coming from the other side of the door, from the rooftop itself. She paused, her hand hovering over her tool bag. The voices were familiar. She recognized the tone, the easy confidence. It was the same group of cadets from earlier. She hesitated. The rooftop was a restricted area. Cadets were not supposed to be up there without supervision, but it was not her place to enforce rules. She was just here to fix the door. She pushed the door open. The wind hit her immediately, strong and cold. The rooftop stretched out before her, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. And there, near the center of the rooftop, were the 4 cadets. They turned as one when they heard the door open. The tall one, Vale, smiled. It was the same smile from that morning, the one that did not reach his eyes. You again, he said. Sloan stepped onto the rooftop, her tool bag in hand. Maintenance request, jammed door. A girl with dark hair and sharp eyes stepped forward. Her name tag read, Cord. Funny. We didn't call maintenance. Sloan felt a prickle of unease. Someone did. The 3rd cadet, a young man with broad shoulders and a familiar last name on. His uniform, Merrick, crossed his arms. Maybe you should leave. Before Sloan could respond, the door behind her slammed shut. The sound was loud, final. She turned, her hand reaching for the handle, but it did not move. The door was locked. She turned back to the cadets. They had spread out, forming a loose semicircle between her and the door. The 4th cadet, a wiry young man named Ray, was grinning. Looks like you are stuck up here with us, Vale said. Sloan set down her tool bag slowly. Her mind was already assessing the situation. 4 of them. 1 of her. The door was locked. The rooftop was isolated. No one would hear if she called for help. She kept her voice calm. I am just here to do my job. Let me fix the door, and I will leave. Cord stepped closer. We have been talking about you. Some of us think you are inappropriate. Always around. Always watching. Sloan shook her head. I work here. I go where I'm assigned. Ray laughed. You are lying. I have seen you, staring at us. I do not know what you are talking about. Vale took another step forward. See, that is the problem. You do not talk. You do not smile. You just lurk. It makes people uncomfortable. Sloane took a step back, her eyes never leaving them. She was calculating distances, angles, exits. The edge of the roof was behind her, maybe 10 feet away. The drop was 4 stories. The wind was strong, unpredictable. Merrick spoke again, his voice laced with disdain. My dad says people like you are why standards dropped, letting anyone in, giving everyone participation trophies. Your dad does not know me, Sloane said quietly. He does not need to, Merrick shot back. Cord tilted her head, studying Sloane with cold eyes. Maybe she is dangerous. Maybe we should report her. Vale grinned. Or maybe we should teach her a lesson about boundaries. Sloane felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her breathing steady. She had been in worse situations than this, much worse. But that was a long time ago. That was a different life. She did not want to go back to that place. Ray moved behind her, cutting off any chance of retreat. She was surrounded now. The wind howled across the rooftop, carrying the distant sounds of the academy below. No one would hear her if she called out. No one would come. Vale stepped even closer. You know what I think? I think you wanted this job so you could be close to us, close to real soldiers. I just want to do my job and go home, Sloane said. Her voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now. Cord smirked. Home to what? You have anyone waiting for you? Sloane did not answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. That is what I thought, Cord said. Sloane felt her jaw tighten. It was the first crack in her composure, the first sign that their words were getting to her. She pushed the feeling down, buried it deep. Emotion was a weakness. She had learned that a long time ago. Merrick took another step forward. My dad says maintenance workers are just people who could not cut it in real jobs. Sloane said nothing. She was focused on their movements, their positioning. Vale was the leader. Cord was the strategist. Merrick was the muscle. Ray was the follower. She had seen this dynamic 100 times before. She knew how it would play out. Vale looked at the others, then back at Sloane. You know what would be really funny? If she just disappeared, quit, left. Nobody would even notice. Nobody would care, Cord added. She does not belong here anyway, Merrick said. And then, like a switch had been flipped, they started chanting. It began low, almost playful, but it grew louder with each repetition. Drop her! Drop her! Drop her! Sloane raised her hands, palms out. I do not want trouble. Please, let me leave. Her voice wavered, just slightly. It was intentional. She wanted them to think she was scared. Scared people were predictable. Scared people did not fight back. Vale heard the waver, and his grin widened. Oh, now she is scared. Now she cares. Ray laughed. Should have thought about that before you creeped us out. Merrick stepped forward, his voice rising. Drop her. Let her die. The chant became a roar, the 4 voices merging into one. Drop her. Let her die. Drop her. Let her die. They were close now, too close. Sloane could feel the wind at her back, stronger now. The edge of the roof was only a few feet away. She took another step back, her boots scraping against the concrete. Vale and Merrick rushed her at the same time. Their hands reached for her shoulders, their intent clear. They were going to push her. They were going to throw her off the roof. Time seemed to slow. Sloane felt their hands make contact with her shoulders. She felt the force of their push. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. The calm facade she had maintained for so long cracked, not out of fear, out of instinct. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. It was muscle memory, deeply ingrained from years of training. She did not resist their push. Instead, she redirected it. Her left hand shot out, catching Vale's wrist and twisting it in a sharp, controlled motion. The wrist lock was textbook perfect, using his own momentum against him. At the same time, her right leg swept behind Merrick's knee, while her shoulder dipped low, absorbing his push and converting it into a throw. The movements were so fast, so precise, that neither cadet had time to react. Vale stumbled sideways, his balance completely gone, and crashed into Merrick. Both of them went down hard, their bodies hitting the concrete with dull thuds. Sloane was already 5 feet away, her stance low and balanced, her breathing steady. Cord and Ray froze. Their eyes were wide, their mouths slightly open. The chanting had stopped. The rooftop was silent except for the wind and the groans of the 2 cadets on the ground. "What the hell?" Cord whispered. Sloane did not respond. She stood there, her hands at her sides, her expression unreadable. Vale sat up, wincing. He looked at Sloane with confusion and something else. Fear. "How did you?" he started, but his voice trailed off. Merrick was slower to get up. He rubbed his shoulder, his face twisted in pain and humiliation. When he finally looked at Sloane, his eyes were filled with anger. But he did not move toward her again. Cord took a step forward, her sharp eyes narrowing. She was studying Sloane now, really studying her. And then her gaze dropped to Sloane's right arm. The sleeve of her uniform had ridden up during the movement, exposing her forearm. There, on the pale skin, was a tattoo. It was not large, but it was distinctive. A trident, crossed with an anchor and a flintlock pistol. But there was something else, small symbols around the edges that most people would not recognize. Cord recognized them. Her face went pale. "Oh my God," she breathed. Vale followed her gaze. He saw the tattoo and his expression changed. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by shock. "That is not possible," he whispered. Ray looked between them, confused. What is it?" Before anyone could answer, Sloane's radio crackled to life. The voice of the dispatcher cut through the tension. "Harriman, status on rooftop repair." Sloane reached for her radio, her eyes never leaving the cadets. She pressed the button, her voice calm and steady. "Door mechanism is jammed. I will need to report a separate incident. Copy. Do you need security backup?" There was a long pause. The cadets held their breath, their eyes fixed on Sloane. She looked at each of them in turn, her expression unreadable. "Negative," she said finally. "Situation is under control." She released the button and clipped the radio back to her belt. The silence on the rooftop was deafening. And then, from the stairwell below, came the sound of heavy footsteps. The door unlocked and swung open. Chief Instructor Dagmar Kelsey stepped onto the rooftop. She was in her late 50s, her uniform adorned with rows of ribbons and medals. Her presence commanded respect. She had spent 28 years in the Marine Corps before coming to Redstone. She had seen combat. She had led soldiers. She did not tolerate nonsense. Kelsey took in the scene with a single sweep of her eyes. The 2 cadets on the ground. The other 2 standing frozen. Sloane standing apart, her posture calm but ready. Kelsey's expression hardened. "What is going on here?" she demanded. Vale opened his mouth to speak, but Kelsey's gaze had already shifted. She was looking at Sloane. More specifically, she was looking at Sloane's exposed forearm, at the tattoo. Kelsey's expression changed. The hardness in her eyes softened, replaced by something else. Recognition. Respect. She straightened, her hand moving to her forehead in a crisp salute. "Ma'am," she said, "I was not aware you were assigned to this facility." The cadets stared in disbelief. Cord's face had gone from pale to ashen. Vale looked like he might be sick. Merrick and Ray stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. Sloane looked at Kelsey, her expression still calm. "I am not assigned, Chief. I work here." Kelsey lowered her salute slowly, her brow furrowing. "Work? As maintenance?" "Yes." Kelsey glanced at the tattoo again, then back at Sloane's face. The pieces were falling into place. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "I am not ma'am anymore," Sloane said quietly. "I am just Sloane." Kelsey studied her for a long moment. "With respect, that tattoo says otherwise." She turned to the cadets, her voice dropping to a tone that could freeze blood. "Cadet Vale, did you assault this woman?" Vale looked like he wanted to disappear. "Chief, we were just—" "Be very careful with your next words," Kelsey cut him off. She turned back to Sloane. "Did these cadets assault you?" Sloane looked at each of them. She could see the fear in their eyes, the realization of what they had done. They were kids. Arrogant, entitled kids who had never faced real consequences. But they were still kids. "They are young," Sloane said. "They made a mistake." "That is not what I asked," Kelsey said firmly. Sloane sighed. "Yes." The word hung in the air like a hammer blow. Vale closed his eyes. Cord looked like she might cry. Merrick's face had gone red with shame. Ray just stared at the ground. Kelsey's expression was unreadable. "Do you know what that tattoo means?" she asked the cadets. Cord's voice was barely a whisper. "SEAL Team Operations." "Not just SEAL Team," Kelsey said. "The variant she is wearing is reserved for Tier 1 direct action, classified missions, the kind you will never read about in any briefing." She stepped closer to them, her voice low and dangerous. "This woman has done more for your country in a single deployment than your entire families combined, and you tried to throw her off a roof." The cadets said nothing. There was nothing they could say. Sloan spoke again, her voice steady. "Why am I working maintenance? Because I am done being what I was. I did 12 years, 6 deployments, saw things, did things that do not wash off." She looked out at the darkening sky, her expression distant. "I wanted quiet. I wanted normal. I wanted to be invisible." Vale's voice cracked. "We did not know." Sloan turned back to him. "That is the point. You should not have to know someone's past to treat them with basic human respect." The wind howled across the rooftop, carrying with it the sounds of the academy below. Somewhere, a flag was snapping against its pole. Somewhere, cadets were laughing. Somewhere, life was going on as it always did. But up here, on this rooftop, everything had changed. If you found this story powerful, if it made you think about the people you overlook every day, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in honoring those who serve in silence, consider subscribing to hear more stories like this. The rooftop had gone silent except for the wind. Chief Instructor Kelsey stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes moving between the 4 cadets and Sloan. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, leaving the sky streaked with deep purple and fading orange. The academy lights below had begun to flicker on, casting a warm glow across the grounds. Up here, the air was cold and sharp. Kelsey's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "All of you, on your feet, now." Vale and Merrick scrambled to stand. Their uniforms were dusty from the concrete, their faces flushed with shame and fear. Cord and Ray remained frozen, their eyes still fixed on Sloan's tattoo, as if they could not quite believe what they were seeing. "I said now," Kelsey repeated. They snapped to attention, their backs straight, their hands at their sides. It was the posture of discipline, but their faces told a different story. They looked like children caught in a lie, waiting for punishment they knew they deserved. Kelsey turned to Sloan. Her expression softened, but only slightly. "Ma'am, the decision on how to proceed is yours. Do you want to press charges?" Sloan looked at the cadets for a long moment. She could see Vale's jaw trembling. She could see Cord's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She could see Merrick's eyes fixed on the ground, unable to meet her gaze. And Ray, the follower, looked like he might be sick. They were arrogant. They were cruel. They had tried to hurt her, maybe even kill her. But they were also young, young enough to learn, young enough to change. "No," Sloan said quietly. The cadets exhaled, their relief almost palpable, but Sloan was not finished. "But I want them to understand something." She stepped forward. The cadets instinctively took a step back, their fear still fresh. Sloan stopped a few feet away, her hands at her sides, her posture relaxed. But there was something in her eyes, a hardness that had not been there before. "Strength is not loud," she said. "Real operators do not need to prove anything. The most dangerous people you will ever meet are the ones who choose peace, because they know exactly what violence costs." She looked at Merrick. "Tell your father that." Merrick nodded, his face pale. Kelsey saluted again, her hand crisp and precise. "It is an honor to serve alongside you, even if you are fixing toilets." Sloan's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. "Someone has to do it." She turned toward the door, picking up her tool bag as she went. Vale's voice stopped her. "Wait." She paused but did not turn around. "I am sorry," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. "We are sorry." Sloan turned her head slightly, just enough to see him out of the corner of her eye. "Sorry does not mean much. Be better. That is what matters." She walked to the door. Kelsey followed, unlocking it with a key from her belt. The door swung open, revealing the dimly lit stairwell beyond. Sloan stepped through without looking back. Breslin Cord's voice called out, shaky but insistent. "Why did you not fight back? Really fight back? Sloane stopped in the doorway. The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. She turned, her eyes meeting Cord's. "Because I am not that person anymore," she said, "and I never want to be again." She walked down the stairs, the sound of her boots echoing in the stairwell. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving the cadets alone on the rooftop with Chief Kelsey. Kelsey looked at them, her expression unreadable. "You four will report to my office at 0600 tomorrow morning. We will discuss what happens next. Until then, you are confined to your quarters. Understood?" "Yes, Chief," they said in unison. Dismissed. They filed past her, their heads down, their shoulders slumped. Kelsey watched them go, then looked out at the academy below. The lights were brighter now, the grounds alive with evening activity. Somewhere down there, Sloane Harriman was walking back to the maintenance shed, invisible once more. Kelsey shook her head slowly. "What a waste," she muttered to herself. She turned and followed the cadets down the stairs, locking the rooftop door behind her. Sloane did not go straight back to the maintenance shed. Instead, she walked the perimeter of the academy grounds, her tool bag slung over her shoulder. The night air was cold, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events on the rooftop over and over. She had not wanted this. She had come to Redstone to disappear, to be nobody. For months it had worked. She had done her job, kept her head down, and avoided attention. But now, everything had changed. Now, people knew. Or at least, some people knew. She stopped near the edge of the parade grounds, looking out at the rows of barracks. Lights glowed in the windows. She could hear distant voices, laughter, the sounds of young people living their lives. It reminded her of another time, another place, a time when she had been one of them, young and full of certainty. But that was a long time ago. She resumed walking, her boots crunching softly on the gravel path. The maintenance shed was dark when she reached it. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, flipping on the overhead light. The fluorescent bulb flickered, then steadied. She set her tool bag on the workbench and stood there for a moment, staring at the locker in the corner. The metal case inside called to her, as it always did. She had not opened it in months. She had promised herself she would not. But tonight, after everything that had happened, the pull was stronger. She walked to the locker and opened it. Her work clothes hung neatly on hooks. Her spare boots sat at the bottom, and on the top shelf, pushed to the back, was the case. She pulled it down and set it on the workbench. The lock was a simple combination, the numbers worn smooth from years of use. She spun the dial, her fingers moving automatically. The lock clicked open. She lifted the lid. Inside was her old life. Her uniform, carefully folded. A row of medals and commendations, each one a reminder of something she had done, something she had survived. A folded American flag, the edges crisp and clean. And beneath it all, a single photograph. She picked up the photograph, her hands steady, but her heart heavy. It showed a group of people in tactical gear, their faces smeared with camouflage paint, their eyes bright with adrenaline. They were smiling, every one of them. She was in the center, younger, her expression fierce and confident. She did not recognize that person anymore. She stared at the photograph for a long time, then carefully placed it back in the case. She closed the lid, locked it, and returned it to the locker. She shut the locker door and leaned against it, her eyes closed. "I am not that person anymore," she whispered to herself. But even as she said it, she knew it was not entirely true. That person was still inside her, buried deep. And tonight, for just a moment, that person had surfaced. She opened her eyes and looked around the shed. The tools, the spare parts, the quiet solitude. This was her life now. This was what she had chosen. And she would not let anyone take it from her. The next morning arrived with the same routine. Sloane woke before dawn, dressed in her faded uniform, and made her way to the academy. The grounds were still dark, the only sounds the distant echo of early drills and the hum of machinery. She entered through the maintenance entrance and made her way to the shed. But something was different. As she walked through the corridors, she noticed cadets staring at her. Not with disdain or dismissal, but with something else. Curiosity. Respect. Fear. Word had spread. She kept her head down and kept walking. She did not want their attention. She did not want their respect. She just wanted to be left alone. When she reached the shed, she found Chief Kelsey waiting for her. The older woman stood near the workbench, her hands clasped behind her back. She looked up when Sloane entered. "Morning," Kelsey said. "Chief," Sloane replied, setting down her tool bag. "I wanted to speak with you before the day started." Sloane said nothing, waiting. Kelsey stepped forward. "I made some calls last night, reached out to some old contacts. Your record is impressive. 6 deployments, 12 years of service, commendations I cannot even read because they are still classified." Sloane's expression did not change. "That was a long time ago." "It does not have to be," Kelsey said. "I can make calls, get you reassigned. You could teach here, tactics, close quarters combat, mental resilience. You would be incredible." Sloane shook her head. "I appreciate it, but no." "Can I ask why?" Sloane looked at her, her eyes steady. "Because this job, nobody shoots at me, nobody dies. I go home every night. That might not sound like much, but to me, it is everything." Kelsey studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand. Thank you." Kelsey turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it is worth, I think you are making a mistake. You have a lot to offer. These kids." "I already gave enough," Sloane said quietly. Kelsey left without another word. Sloane stood alone in the shed, the silence pressing down on her. She picked up her tool bag and began preparing for the day. There were repairs to be made, work to be done. Life went on, as it always did. But as she worked, she could not shake the feeling that something had shifted. The invisibility she had worked so hard to maintain was gone. People knew who she was now, or at least what she had been, and she was not sure if she could ever get that anonymity back. Over the following days, the attention grew. Cadets she had never met would nod to her as she passed. Some even saluted, awkwardly and uncertain, as if they were not sure if it was appropriate. Instructors who had ignored her before now greeted her by name. The maintenance staff treated her differently too, their jokes and casual banter replaced by a kind of reverent distance. She hated it. She went about her work as she always had, but the ease was gone. Every interaction felt weighted, every glance loaded with meaning. She had become a symbol, a story, a piece of academy lore, and she wanted none of it. The 4 cadets from the rooftop were nowhere to be seen. She heard through the grapevine that they had been placed on disciplinary probation. No details were given, but the message was clear. They had crossed a line, and there were consequences. Sloane did not feel vindicated. She felt tired. One afternoon, nearly a week after the rooftop incident, she was called to repair a leaking pipe in one of the cadet barracks. She arrived with her tool bag and found the room empty except for a single first-year cadet sitting on his bunk. He was young, maybe 18, with a fresh face and haunted eyes. He looked up when she entered, then quickly looked away. Sloane set down her tool bag and examined the pipe. The leak was minor, just a loose connection. She tightened it with a wrench, tested it, and wiped away the excess water. As she worked, she noticed the cadet watching her. He seemed nervous, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. She could see the signs: homesickness, self-doubt, the weight of expectations he was not sure he could meet. She finished the repair and packed her tools. As she turned to leave, the cadet spoke. "Is it true?" She paused. "Is what true?" "That you were a SEAL." Sloane looked at him. His eyes were wide, earnest. She could lie, she could deflect. But something in his expression stopped her. "Yes," she said. He nodded slowly, processing. "Why did you leave?" Sloane set down her tool bag. She walked over and sat on the bunk across from him, her elbows resting on her knees. "Because I did what I needed to do. And then I was done." Was it worth it? She considered the question. It was one she had asked herself 100 times, late at night when sleep would not come. The things I did, the people I served with. Yes, that was worth it. The things it cost me, that is harder to answer. The cadet nodded again. "I do not know if I can do this," he said quietly. "Everyone here is so confident, so sure, and I just feel lost." Sloane looked at him, really looked at him. She saw herself in his eyes, years ago, standing at the edge of something vast and uncertain. "First week is the hardest," she said. "Does it get easier? Eventually. You learn what matters. What does not? What matters? Showing up, doing the work, treating people right. Everything else is noise." The cadet smiled, just a little. Thanks. Sloane stood and picked up her tool bag. Hey, the cadet said. Are you really just maintenance? Sloane looked at him, her expression soft. I am just maintenance. That is all. She left the room, the door closing softly behind her. As she walked down the hallway, she felt something shift inside her. The weight she had been carrying felt a little lighter. Maybe there was value in what she was doing now. Maybe being invisible was not the only way to find peace. But the feeling did not last long. That evening, as she was locking up the maintenance shed, her radio crackled to life. It was the dispatcher, but the voice was different. Urgent. All maintenance personnel. This is dispatch. We have a situation in the West Training Facility. Electrical fire. Respond immediately. Sloane grabbed her tool bag and ran. The West Training Facility was on the far side of the academy, a large building used for indoor combat simulations. As she ran, she could see smoke rising into the evening sky, thick and black. When she arrived, chaos greeted her. Cadets were evacuating the building, coughing and stumbling. Instructors were shouting orders, trying to maintain order. Fire alarms blared, the sound piercing and relentless. Sloane pushed through the crowd and found the building supervisor, a man named Garrett. Where is the fire? Electrical room, basement level, he shouted over the noise. The breaker panel is overloaded. I sent someone down, but they could not get close. Too much smoke. Sloane did not hesitate. I will go. You cannot. It is too dangerous. She ignored him and ran into the building. The smoke was thick, burning her eyes and throat. She pulled her shirt up over her nose and mouth, breathing through the fabric. The stairs to the basement were at the back of the building. She found them and descended, the heat growing with every step. The electrical room was at the end of a long hallway. Smoke poured from under the door, and she could hear the crackle of flames inside. She pushed the door open and was hit by a wall of heat. The breaker panel was on the far wall, engulfed in flames. Sparks flew from the exposed wiring, and the smell of burning plastic filled the air. Sloane moved quickly, her eyes scanning the room. She found the main shutoff switch near the door and pulled it down. The lights went out, plunging the room into darkness except for the glow of the fire. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and aimed it at the panel. The foam sprayed out, covering the flames. She worked methodically, sweeping the extinguisher back and forth until the fire was out. The room was dark and hot, the air thick with smoke. She stood there for a moment, catching her breath. Then she turned and made her way back up the stairs. When she emerged from the building, the crowd parted. Garrett stared at her, his face a mix of shock and relief. You put it out? She nodded. Main power is off. You will need an electrician to assess the damage before turning it back on. Garrett shook his head in disbelief. How did you? Sloane did not answer. She walked past him, her tool bag still slung over her shoulder. As she moved through the crowd, cadets and instructors alike stared at her. Some looked awed, others looked afraid. She kept walking. She did not want their praise. She did not want their fear. She just wanted to go home. But as she reached the edge of the training grounds, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Chief Kelsey approaching, her expression unreadable. That was reckless, Kelsey said. It needed to be done. You could have been killed. But I was not. Kelsey studied her for a long moment. You are wasted here, she said finally. You know that, right? Sloane looked at her, her eyes tired. I am exactly where I need to be. Kelsey nodded slowly. If you ever change your mind, the offer stands. She walked away, leaving Sloane alone in the growing darkness. Sloane stood there for a moment, then turned and headed back to the maintenance shed. The day had been long, and she was exhausted. But as she walked, she could not shake the feeling that something was building, something she could not control. That night, as she sat alone in the shed, her radio crackled again. It was dispatch, but this time the message was different. Harriman, report to the commandant's office. Immediately. Sloane stared at the radio, her mind racing. The commandant's office. That was not good. She stood, grabbed her jacket, and made her way across the academy grounds. The night was cold, the stars bright overhead. The commandant's office was in the main administrative building, on the top floor. She climbed the stairs, her boots echoing in the empty hallways. When she reached the office, the door was open. Inside, Commandant Aldrich Venn sat behind a large desk, his hands folded in front of him. He was in his 60s, a man with silver hair and sharp eyes. He had been a general before retiring to run Redstone. "Harriman," he said. "Come in. Close the door." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She stood at attention, her hands at her sides. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. She sat. Ven studied her for a long moment. "I have been hearing a lot about you lately." Sloane said nothing. An incident on the rooftop, an electrical fire, and before that, months of exemplary work that nobody noticed. He leaned back in his chair. "You are an interesting person, Miss Harriman." "I just do my job, sir." "Yes, you do. But your job is not really maintenance, is it?" She met his gaze. "It is now?" He nodded slowly. "I spoke with Chief Kelsey. She told me about your background. 12 years, 6 deployments, a record that would make most generals jealous. That was a long time ago. And yet, here you are, fixing pipes and putting out fires. Why?" Sloane hesitated. The question was simple, but the answer was not. "Because I needed to stop." "Stop what?" "Being what I was." She looked down at her hands. "I did things I am proud of. And I did things I will never forgive myself for. When I left, I needed something simple, something quiet. Maintenance gave me that." Van nodded. "I understand, but I have a problem." She looked up. "My cadets are talking. Word has spread about who you are. Some of them see you as a hero, others see you as a threat, and a few, like the ones on that rooftop, see you as someone they underestimated." Sloane said nothing. Ven leaned forward. "I need to know if you are a liability or an asset." "I am neither. I am just someone trying to live a quiet life. That is not an option anymore. You are part of this academy now, whether you like it or not. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Sloane felt a knot forming in her stomach. She had come here to disappear, but disappearing was no longer possible. "What do you want from me?" Ven smiled, but it was not a warm smile. "I want you to help me. These cadets, they are the future, but they are also arrogant, entitled. They think they know what strength is. You can show them the truth. I am not a teacher. You do not have to be. Just keep doing what you are doing. Fix things. Be present. And when the time comes, be who you were trained to be." Sloane shook her head. "I left that behind." "Did you?" Ven's eyes were piercing. "Or are you just hiding from it?" She stood, her jaw tight. "With respect, sir, I did not come here to be part of your plan. I came here to work, and you will continue to work, but you will also accept that you are no longer invisible. The sooner you make peace with that, the better." He stood as well, his expression softening slightly. "You can go." "Think about what I said." Sloane turned and walked to the door. As she reached for the handle, Ven spoke again. "Harriman." She paused. "You saved lives tonight. That still matters." She opened the door and walked out, the words echoing in her mind. If this story resonates with you, if you have ever felt the weight of a past you cannot escape, share your thoughts below. And if you want to see how this journey ends, stay with us. The morning after her meeting with Commandant Ven, Sloane woke before dawn as she always did. But something felt different. The air in her small apartment carried a weight it had not held before. She dressed in her maintenance uniform, laced her boots, and stared at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was tired, her eyes shadowed with sleepless nights and unresolved questions. She had spent most of the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the Commandant's words in her mind. "You are part of this academy now, whether you like it or not." The words had burrowed into her thoughts, refusing to let her rest. She had come to Redstone to disappear, to be nobody. But that option was gone now. The question was, what would take its place? She left her apartment and drove to the academy in silence. The roads were empty, the world still dark. When she arrived, the grounds were quiet. She parked in her truck for a moment, her hands resting on the steering wheel. Through the windshield, she could see the lights of the academy beginning to flicker on, one by one, as the day prepared to start. She took a deep breath and stepped out. The maintenance shed was cold when she entered. She flipped on the light and began gathering her tools. Her radio crackled with the morning dispatch. Routine calls, broken fixtures, leaking pipes. The same work she had been doing for months. But today, it felt different. Today she could not shake the feeling that everything was about to change. She was halfway through her first repair, tightening a loose connection in a bathroom sink when she heard voices in the hallway outside. Cadets. She recognized the tone, the easy confidence that came with youth and privilege. She finished tightening the bolt and packed her tools. As she stepped into the hallway, she saw them. Lockhart Vale, Breslin Cord, Tyne Merrick, and Jessup Ray. They were standing in formation, their uniforms immaculate, their postures stiff, but their eyes told a different story. When they saw her, they straightened even more, their faces pale. Sloane stopped, her tool bag in hand. For a moment, no one spoke. The hallway was silent except for the distant hum of the ventilation system and the muffled sounds of activity from other parts of the building. Then Vale stepped forward. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Ma'am." Sloane shook her head. "I told you, I am not ma'am, I am just Sloane." He nodded, swallowing hard. "We wanted to apologize. Properly." Cord stepped forward next, her sharp eyes now filled with something that looked like genuine remorse. "What we did on that rooftop, it was wrong. We were wrong. And we are sorry." Merrick and Ray nodded in agreement, their expressions sincere. Sloane looked at each of them in turn. She could see the shame in their eyes, the weight of what they had done. They were young, they had made a terrible mistake, but they were trying to own it. "Apologies are a start," she said, "but actions matter more than words. Be better, not just to me, but to everyone. That is how you make this right." "Yes, ma'am," they said in unison. She nodded and walked past them. As she moved down the hallway, she heard Vale speak again. "We will." She did not turn around, but she felt something shift inside her. Maybe they would change, maybe they would not, but at least they were trying, and that was more than she had expected. The rest of the morning passed without incident. Sloane worked through her task list, her hands busy, her mind quieter than it had been in days. She fixed a jammed door in the library, replaced a burnt-out bulb in the gymnasium, and cleared a clogged drain in one of the dormitory buildings. Simple tasks, routine work, the kind of work that did not require thought. But as she worked, she noticed something. Cadets were watching her, not with the dismissive glances she had grown accustomed to, but with something else. Curiosity, respect, fear. Word had spread through the academy like wildfire. The quiet maintenance worker was not who she appeared to be. She was someone who had done things they could only imagine, someone who had survived things they could not comprehend. She kept her head down and kept working. She did not want their attention. She did not want their respect. She just wanted to be left alone. But as the afternoon approached, her radio crackled again. This time, the message was different. "All personnel, report to the main parade grounds at 1400 hours. Mandatory assembly." Sloane frowned. Mandatory assemblies were rare. They were usually reserved for major announcements or formal ceremonies. She finished her current task, cleaned her tools, and made her way to the parade grounds. By the time she arrived, the grounds were already filled with cadets, instructors, and staff. They stood in organized rows, their uniforms crisp, their postures rigid. The entire academy seemed to be present. Hundreds of people gathered in the afternoon sun. Sloane hung back near the edge, her tool bag still slung over her shoulder. She did not belong in the formation. She was not part of the academy in that way. At the front of the parade grounds, a stage had been set up. Commandant Venn stood at the center, his hands clasped behind his back. Chief Kelsey stood to his right, her expression unreadable. To his left stood several other senior instructors, their uniforms adorned with medals and ribbons that spoke of long careers and hard-won experience. Venn stepped forward to the microphone. His voice carried across the grounds, clear and authoritative. "Good afternoon. Thank you all for gathering. Today I want to address something that has been on my mind for the past week, something that has reminded me why we do what we do here at Redstone." The crowd was silent, every eye fixed on the commandant. The only sounds were the distant rustle of flags in the wind and the occasional cough from the assembled masses. Last week, an incident occurred on the rooftop of Building 7. 4 of our cadets made a grave error in judgment. They allowed arrogance and peer pressure to cloud their sense of right and wrong. And in doing so, they nearly committed an act that would have ended not only their careers, but potentially someone's life. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sloane felt her stomach tighten. She did not want this. She did not want to be part of a public spectacle. She had come to Redstone to escape attention, not to become the center of it. Ven continued, his voice growing stronger. The person they targeted was someone they saw as weak, someone they believed did not belong here, someone they thought they could intimidate without consequence. He paused, letting the words sink in. The silence was absolute now, the tension palpable. They were wrong. He turned and gestured toward the edge of the parade grounds, his hand extended directly toward where Sloane stood. Sloane Harriman, please step forward. Every head turned, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Sloane felt her heart start to race, her breath catching in her throat. She did not move. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the crowd and vanish. But Ven was waiting, his hand still extended, his eyes locked on hers. Slowly, reluctantly, she stepped forward. The crowd parted as she walked, a path opening before her like the Red Sea. She could feel their stares, their curiosity, their judgment. Some faces showed respect, others showed confusion, a few showed fear. She kept her eyes fixed on the stage, her expression calm, even as her insides churned with anxiety and resistance. When she reached the stage, Ven gestured for her to stand beside him. She climbed the steps, her boots heavy on the wood. She stood next to Kelsey, her hands at her sides, her posture straight. She could see the entire academy from here, row upon row of faces staring back at her. It was overwhelming, suffocating, but she forced herself to breathe steadily, to maintain her composure. Ven turned to the crowd. Most of you know Miss Harriman as a member of our maintenance staff. You have seen her fixing things, cleaning, doing the work that keeps this academy running. What you may not know is who she was before she came here. He turned to Sloane, his expression respectful. May I? She hesitated, her jaw tight. Every instinct told her to refuse, to walk off this stage and never look back. But she could see the expectation in Ven's eyes, the purpose behind this public display. Finally, reluctantly, she nodded. Ven faced the crowd again. Sloane Harriman served 12 years in the United States Navy. She completed 6 combat deployments to some of the most dangerous regions in the world. She was part of a Tier 1 Special Operations unit, conducting missions that remain classified to this day. She earned commendations for valor, for leadership, and for actions that saved the lives of her teammates and civilians alike. The crowd was silent, the weight of his words settling over them like a blanket. Sloane could feel hundreds of eyes on her, reassessing, recalculating. She was no longer the invisible maintenance worker. She was something else now, whether she wanted to be or not. And when she left the service, Ven continued, she did not ask for recognition. She did not seek glory or acclaim. She came here, to Redstone, and she took a job in maintenance. Because she wanted peace. Because she wanted to contribute in a way that did not require violence. Because she wanted to live a quiet life. He paused, letting the words sink in. The silence stretched, heavy and meaningful. Last week, 4 of our cadets tried to throw her off a roof. They chanted for her death. They saw her as weak, as someone they could hurt without consequence. And in doing so, they revealed something about themselves. They revealed that they have not yet learned what true strength is. He turned to Sloane again, his voice softer. Would you like to say anything? Sloane looked out at the crowd. She could see Vale and his group near the front, their heads bowed in shame. She could see the first-year cadet she had spoken to in the barracks, his eyes wide and attentive. She could see instructors she had never met, cadets she had never spoken to, staff members she passed every day without acknowledgement, all of them waiting for her to speak. She stepped forward to the microphone. Her voice was steady, calm, but there was an edge to it that carried across the parade grounds. I did not come here to be a symbol. I came here to work, to live a quiet life, to do something simple and good. But I understand that is not possible anymore. So, I will say this. She looked directly at the cadets, her gaze sweeping across the assembled rows. Strength is not about how loud you are. It is not about how much you can intimidate someone. Real strength is quiet. It is doing the right thing when no one is watching. It is choosing peace when you have the power to choose violence. And it is treating everyone, no matter their position or their past, with dignity and respect. She paused, her eyes finding Vale's. He looked like he wanted to disappear, but he held her gaze. I have done things I am proud of, she continued, and I have done things I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Things that wake me up at night, things that changed who I am in ways I can never undo. But the person I am now, the person standing in front of you, is someone who chooses to fix things instead of breaking them. And that is the person I want to be. The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, deliberately, one person began to clap. It was Chief Kelsey. Her hands came together in a steady, measured rhythm. Then another joined, and another. Within moments, the entire parade grounds erupted in applause. Sloane stood there, her hands at her sides, her expression unchanged. She did not want their applause. She had not asked for this recognition, but she understood what it meant. It was not for her, not really. It was for what she represented. A reminder that strength came in many forms. A reminder that the people you overlook might be the ones who have sacrificed the most. Venn stepped forward again, raising his hand for silence. The applause faded gradually, reluctantly. Miss Harriman will continue her work here at Redstone, and I expect every one of you to treat her with the respect she has earned, not because of her past, but because of who she is now. Someone who serves this academy with integrity and humility. Someone who embodies the values we claim to teach. He turned to Sloane. Thank you. She nodded and stepped back. Venn dismissed the assembly, and the crowd began to disperse. Sloane descended the steps and made her way back toward the maintenance shed. As she walked, cadets and instructors approached her, offering words of thanks, of respect, of admiration. Some saluted, others simply nodded. She accepted them with quiet nods, but she did not linger. She needed to get away, to find somewhere quiet where she could breathe. When she finally reached the shed, she closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her eyes closed. The weight of the day pressed down on her, heavy and overwhelming. She had not wanted this. She had not asked for any of it. But it was done now. There was no going back. The anonymity she had worked so hard to maintain was gone, shattered by a single incident on a rooftop. She opened her eyes and looked at the locker in the corner. The metal case inside seemed to glow in the dim light, calling to her as it always did. She walked over, opened the locker, and pulled out the case. She set it on the workbench and stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, she opened it. Inside were the remnants of her old life, her uniform carefully folded, the fabric still holding the faint smell of salt air and gun oil, her medals and commendations, each one a reminder of something she had done, something she had survived. A folded American flag, the edges crisp and clean, presented to her at a memorial service for a teammate who did not come home. And beneath it all, a single photograph. She picked up the photograph and studied it. It showed a group of people in tactical gear, their faces smeared with camouflage paint, their eyes bright with adrenaline and purpose. They were smiling, every one of them. She was in the center, younger, her expression fierce and confident. She looked powerful, invincible, like nothing could touch her. She did not recognize that person anymore. She thought about the missions, the firefights, the close calls, the people she had saved, the people she had not been able to save, the weight of every decision, every action, every consequence. It had seemed so clear back then. There were good guys and bad guys, right and wrong, mission success and mission failure. But over time, the lines had blurred. The things she had done in service of her country had changed her in ways she could never undo. She placed the photograph back in the case and closed the lid. But this time, she did not lock it. She left it on the workbench, open and visible, a reminder of where she had been and where she was now. The following days brought a shift in the atmosphere at Redstone. Sloane continued her work, but the interactions were different. Cadets greeted her by name. Instructors nodded to her in the hallways. Even the maintenance staff treated her with a kind of reverent respect that made her uncomfortable. She did not seek it out, but she did not avoid it either. She was learning to accept that her past was part of who she was, even if it was not all of who she was. She was learning that hiding from it had not made it go away. It had only delayed the inevitable reckoning. One afternoon, she was called to repair a broken window in one of the training buildings. When she arrived, she found a group of first-year cadets practicing drills under the supervision of an instructor. They paused when she entered, their eyes following her as she moved to the window. She could feel their curiosity, their questions. But they remained silent, disciplined. As she worked, the instructor approached. His name was Captain Reese, a man in his 40s with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes. He had the bearing of someone who had seen combat, who understood what it meant to serve. "Miss Harriman," he said, "may I ask you a question?" She glanced at him, then back at the window. "Sure. The cadets here, they look up to you. They see you as someone who has been where they want to go. Do you have any advice for them?" Sloane paused, her hands resting on the windowsill. She turned to look at the cadets. They were watching her, their expressions earnest and hopeful. They were so young, so full of ambition and idealism. She remembered being like that once. "Do not confuse confidence with competence," she said, "and do not mistake arrogance for strength. The best operators I ever worked with were the ones who listened more than they talked, who learned from their mistakes instead of repeating them, and who understood that their job was not about glory, it was about service." The cadets nodded, their faces serious, absorbing every word. "And one more thing," Sloane added. "Take care of each other. The mission matters, but the people beside you matter more. You will face situations where you have to choose between completing the objective and saving your teammate. Choose your teammate, every time, because at the end of the day, the mission will be forgotten, but the people you serve with will remember whether you had their back." The room was silent. Captain Reese nodded slowly, a look of deep respect on his face. "Thank you," he said. She turned back to the window and finished the repair. When she left, the cadets were still standing in silence, the weight of her words settling over them, like a mantle they were not yet ready to wear, but would need to carry someday. As the weeks passed, Sloane found a rhythm. She worked her maintenance routes, fixed the things that needed fixing, and returned to her apartment each evening. But she also began to accept the small moments of connection. The cadet who thanked her for her advice, the instructor who asked her opinion on training techniques, the staff member who invited her to join them for lunch. She did not say yes to everything, but she said yes more often than she had before. She was learning that connection did not have to mean weakness. That opening up did not have to mean vulnerability. That she could be both the person she had been and the person she was becoming. One evening, as she was locking up the maintenance shed, Chief Kelsey approached. The older woman walked with a steady gait, her hands in her pockets, her expression thoughtful. "You did a good thing," Kelsey said, "at the assembly. You reminded people what matters." Sloane shrugged. "I just told the truth. That is what makes it powerful. The truth, delivered plainly, without embellishment. Most people are afraid of that kind of honesty." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun set over the academy grounds. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the same colors that had filled the sky on that rooftop weeks ago. "You know," Kelsey said, "I have been thinking about what you said, about choosing peace. I respect that. But I also think there is value in teaching, not because you need to relive your past, but because you have something to offer these kids that no textbook can provide." Sloane looked at her. "I am not a teacher. You do not have to be in a classroom, just be present. Let them see what real strength looks like. Let them learn from your example. That is teaching, whether you call it that or not." Sloane considered her words. The idea of teaching, of being responsible for shaping young minds, terrified her. What if she failed them? What if her experiences, her darkness, did more harm than good? "Maybe," she said finally. Kelsey smiled. "That is more than a no. I will take it." She walked away, leaving Sloane alone in the fading light. Sloane stood there for a long time, watching the colors drain from the sky, replaced by the deep blue of twilight and the first stars beginning to emerge. Months passed. The incident on the rooftop became a story, a piece of academy lore that new cadets learned about during orientation. Vale, Cord, Merrick, and Ray completed their probation and graduated. They left Redstone changed, their arrogance replaced by humility, their cruelty replaced by respect. Sloane heard that Vale had requested assignment to a combat engineering unit, a far cry from the glory-seeking ambitions he had arrived with. Cord had chosen intelligence work, using her analytical mind in service rather than manipulation. Merrick had written her a letter, apologizing again and explaining that he had begun volunteering with veteran support organizations. Ray had simply sent a card that said, "Thank you." Sloane kept the card in her locker, next to the metal case. Small reminders that change was possible, that people could grow, that mistakes, even terrible ones, did not have to define a person forever. She continued her work. She fixed pipes and replaced bulbs and cleared drains. But she also found herself stopping to talk to cadets who looked lost, to offer advice to instructors who asked, to be present in a way she had not been before. She was not a teacher in the formal sense, but she was teaching nonetheless, teaching by example, teaching by simply being herself, flaws and all. One afternoon, she was called to repair a sink in the same barracks where she had spoken to the first-year cadet months before. When she arrived, she found him sitting on his bunk, his face drawn and tired. He looked older than he had before, his eyes carrying the weight of the challenges he had faced. "You again," she said with a small smile. He looked up, surprised, then returned the smile. "Yeah. The sink started leaking this morning. I swear this place is falling apart." She set down her tool bag and examined the sink. The problem was simple, a loose connection that had worked itself free over time. She tightened it with her wrench and tested the water. "Fixed." "Thanks," he said. She nodded and started packing her tools. Then she paused and turned to him. "How are you doing?" "Better," he said. "Your advice helped. I stopped worrying so much about fitting in and started focusing on the work. Turns out that when you stop trying to impress people, they respect you more." "Good. You figured out something it took me years to learn." He hesitated, then spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you ever regret it? Leaving the service?" Sloane considered the question. She had been asked it before, by herself mostly, during long nights when sleep would not come. "Every day," she said honestly. "But I also do not regret choosing peace. Both things can be true. I miss the purpose, the clarity of mission, the camaraderie. But I do not miss the cost, the things you have to become to survive in that world. So, yes, I regret it, and no, I do not. Does that make sense?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it does." "You are going to be fine," she said. "Just keep showing up. Keep doing the work. Keep being decent to people. That is all any of us can do." He smiled, genuine and warm. "Thanks. For everything." She picked up her tool bag and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. "And if you ever need to talk, you know where to find me. I will be the one with the wrench, fixing something that broke." He laughed, and the sound lifted something in her chest. She walked down the hallway, her boots echoing in the quiet space. When she stepped outside, the sun was setting, casting the academy grounds in golden light. Cadets were finishing their drills, their voices carrying across the parade grounds. Instructors were walking toward the administrative buildings, their day's work done. Sloane stood there for a moment, watching. This was her life now. Not the life she had planned, not the life she had trained for, but the life she had chosen. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something close to peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the acceptance of it. Not the erasure of her past, but the integration of it into who she was becoming. She walked back to the maintenance shed, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The metal case was still on the workbench, its lid closed but not locked. She looked at it for a moment, then walked over and opened it one more time. She picked up the photograph and studied the faces. Her team. Her brothers and sisters in arms. Some of them were still serving. Some had left, like her. And some were gone, their names etched on memorials, their sacrifices honored, but their losses never truly reconciled. She touched each face gently, a silent goodbye, and a promise to honor their memory by living well, by being better than the violence that had once defined them. Then she placed the photograph back in the case, closed the lid, and locked it. She placed it back in the locker, on the top shelf where it belonged, not forgotten, not abandoned, but no longer the only thing that defined her. She did not need to carry it with her anymore. It was part of her past, woven into the fabric of who she was, but it did not define her present or dictate her future. She was Sloane Harriman. She had been a warrior, she had been a killer, she had been a protector, and now she was someone who fixed things, someone who helped people, someone who chose peace, and that was enough, more than enough. As she locked up the shed and walked to her truck, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The academy was quiet now, the day finally over. The cadets in their barracks, the instructors in their homes. She climbed into her truck and sat there for a moment, her hands resting on the steering wheel. She thought about the cadets on the rooftop. She thought about the commandant's speech. She thought about the first-year cadet and Chief Kelsey and Captain Reese and all the small moments that had brought her to this place. She thought about the person she had been and the person she was becoming. She started the engine and drove home. The roads were empty, the world quiet. The drive gave her time to think, to process, to simply be. When she pulled into her apartment complex, she sat in the truck for a few more minutes, reluctant to leave the solitude. Finally, she climbed out and walked to her door. Inside, her apartment was sparse but comfortable, a place to rest, to recharge, to be alone with her thoughts. She made herself a simple dinner, ate in silence, and cleaned up. Then she sat by the window, looking out at the night sky, the stars bright and clear. She thought about tomorrow, about the repairs she would make, the people she would encounter, the small ways she would contribute to keeping the academy running. It was simple work, unglamorous work, but it was honest work, and it was hers. The next morning, she woke before dawn. She dressed in her maintenance uniform, laced her boots, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was still tired, still marked by the past. But there was something else there now, something lighter: acceptance, purpose, peace. She left her apartment and drove to the academy. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. When she arrived, the grounds were quiet, the world still half asleep. She parked in her usual spot and stepped out. The maintenance shed was cold when she entered. She flipped on the light and began gathering her tools. Her radio crackled with the morning dispatch. Routine calls, broken fixtures, leaking pipes. The familiar rhythm of another day. She smiled. This was her life, and she was ready for it. As she worked through the morning, she noticed something. The cadets who passed her in the hallways did not just see a maintenance worker anymore. They saw someone who had served, who had sacrificed, who had chosen a different path. Some nodded respectfully, others asked questions. A few simply watched, learning from her example. She did not seek out these interactions, but she no longer avoided them either. She answered questions when asked. She offered advice when it seemed needed. She was present in a way she had not been before, allowing herself to be seen, to be known, to be human. In the afternoon, she was repairing a door hinge in one of the administrative buildings when Commandant Venn approached. He walked with purpose, his posture straight, his expression thoughtful. "Miss Harriman," he said, "do you have a moment?" She set down her tools. "Of course." He gestured to a nearby bench, and they sat together, looking out at the parade grounds where cadets were conducting drills. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for what you did at the assembly, for being willing to stand up there and share your truth. I know it was not easy." "It was not," she admitted, "but it mattered. The cadets needed to hear it. They needed to understand that strength comes in many forms, that service does not always look like what they expect, that the people they overlook might be the ones who have given the most." Sloan nodded, watching the cadets march in formation. "I hope they remember it. They will. You gave them something they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. You showed them what it means to choose peace without abandoning strength, to be humble without being weak, to serve without seeking glory." "I just did what you asked." "No," Venn said. "You did more than that. You gave them a gift. The gift of perspective. The gift of wisdom earned through experience. That is invaluable." They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the academy filling the space between them. "If you ever change your mind," Venn said, "about teaching, about taking a more formal role here, the offer stands. We could use someone like you shaping the next generation." Sloan considered his words. "Maybe someday. But for now, I am content where I am." Venn nodded. "I understand. And I respect that." He stood and extended his hand. She shook it, his grip firm and respectful. "Thank you, Miss Harriman, for your service, then and now." He walked away, leaving her alone on the bench. She sat there for a while longer, watching the cadets, watching the sun move across the sky, watching the world continue its steady march forward. Then she stood, picked up her tools, and returned to work. The weeks turned into months, the seasons changed. The academy continued its cycles of training and graduation, of new arrivals and departures, and through it all, Sloan remained, fixing things, helping people, living quietly. She became a fixture of the academy, someone the cadets and staff knew and respected. She was not famous, she was not celebrated, but she was valued, and that was enough. One evening, nearly a year after the incident on the rooftop, she received a letter. It was from Lockhart Vale. She opened it in her apartment, sitting by the window as the sun set. The letter was long, filled with apologies and reflections. He wrote about how that night had changed him, how her words had stayed with him, how he had tried to become the kind of person who deserved respect rather than demanding it. He wrote about his work in combat engineering, about the challenges and the rewards, about how he thought of her often when he faced difficult decisions. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "You saved my life that night, not by letting me fall, but by showing me what real strength looks like. Thank you." Sloan folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with the card from Ray. Small pieces of evidence that change was possible, that people could grow, that her presence, her choice to be here, mattered. She stood and looked out the window. The sky was dark now, the stars bright and clear. Somewhere out there, people she had served with were still fighting, still sacrificing, still carrying the weight of impossible decisions. She honored them by living well, by choosing peace, by being more than the violence that had once defined her. She turned from the window and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring more work, more repairs, more small moments of connection. And she was ready for it. This was her life now, and it was a good life. If you have ever struggled to leave the past behind, if you have ever wondered what it means to find peace after battle, if you have ever questioned whether choosing a quiet life diminishes the value of what you once did, know that you are not alone. Share your story in the comments. Let others know they are not alone either. And if this journey moved you, if Sloan's story resonated with something in your own experience, consider subscribing to hear more stories about courage, redemption, and the quiet strength that defines us all. Thank you for being here, thank you for listening, and thank you for understanding that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose peace.